Welcome, everybody, and welcome back, I hope, to another episode of Mondays with Mundy. That's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. Now, if you're watching, this episode is being broadcast for the first time on Monday, February the 13th, just one day after Abraham Lincoln's birthday, February the 12th. And so we thought we would take all of you on a walking tour through the Union League house to look at all the different images we have of Abraham Lincoln that are on view. So we'll see two paintings, and the rest will all be sculptures, 9 sculptures. So welcome to the League. Now we're going to start the tour in the Broad Street building and at the Broad Street entrance, but the street level entrance that gets us into the Heritage Center, right? So it's under the portico, not up the stairs, all right? So we walk in the Heritage Center, we walk down the stairs, and on the left-hand side is the exhibit of the Civil War of Philadelphia and the Union League. And that's where we're going to start our walk. So let's do it now. I've got to share my screen first, don't I? All right, here we go. There we go. Okay, got that. Got to go way up here to do that. Let me go over there and do that. Come on. And now we've got it. All right, so let's start the tour. And in the exhibit, you turn to your left. First of the 2 Lincoln busts that will come across, portrait bust, if you will, is a bronze done by Max Bachmann, who was born in Brunswick, Germany in 1862, but like a lot of European artists and sculptors, emigrated to the United States to find work. And he eventually ended up in Boston, where he worked for the Caproni galleries, and they were most famous for making the best plaster models in the country. And so while Bachmann was there at Caproni, he did 2 plaster models of Abraham Lincoln, one without the beard and one with the beard. And these were done in 1905. And what we have here is the bronze version of the beardless Lincoln that is signed and dated and copyrighted 1905. And it is, I think, a really, really good image of Abraham Lincoln. And I like the fact that you get the tie and the waistcoat and just the whole idea to get the full torso on the bust there, and the portrait bust. So it was really kind of neat. So, and then of course, behind the bronze, you can see a photographic reproduction of Abraham Lincoln. All right, so that's the first of the 2 that we have in the exhibit. And here's the second one, a marble bust done by the Italian sculptor named Pio Fedi, F-E-D-I, who eventually went, like everybody in Italy, if you want to be a sculptor or an artist, he went to Florence. And that's where he spent most of his life, most of his career as a sculptor. And keep in mind that in Italy in 1861, it was the Risorgimento, it was the unification of all the different Italian states into one country, although it would still take a number of years for it to really congeal. But nonetheless, Italy was going through this level of unification, becoming a country. And so Lincoln was very much on, I think, the Italian mind, if you will, as being the savior of the American Republic during the Civil War. And so Fedi created this marble bust of Lincoln in 1865. And what's amazing is that, and this is a really wonderful image, I think, of Abraham Lincoln, because there were a lot that aren't, although none of ours are all wonderful images in our collection. But nonetheless, though, when you think that Fedi, who never met Lincoln personally, was never in the United States, Fedi had to create this marble bust from either photographs, engravings, right? Maybe portraits, paintings, and things like that. But using his imagination, I think he did a darn good job. And so this is Pio Fedi's version of Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Now, neither of these 2 busts do we have any record of their acquisition in the League's collection. So, but there they are. So we exit the exhibit room and turn to the left, go into further down the hallway. Oh, and this is what the Fedi looks like in the exhibit itself, which you can see there in the background. All right. And so we're now in the hallway. So if you're going into the hallway itself, the right-hand side is the painting of the League House, Charles Britton Cox, left-hand side, the stairwell. And so there in the corner, we have this bronze figure of Abraham Lincoln that was done by Daniel Chester French, England sculptor. England produced a lot of really good 19th century sculptors. And Daniel Chester French is best known for having done that wonderful, gigantic image of marble of Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial Room. I'm sorry, that's a Lincoln Memorial. We have the Lincoln Memorial Room, not this is in the Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C. But in 1903, the state of Nebraska created a Lincoln Memorial Association committee to honor the centennial of Lincoln's birth, which would have been February the 12th of 1909. And Daniel Chester French was chosen as a sculptor for this. And this is what it looks like. Bigger picture of the bronze sculpture. It's larger than life size. Front of a marble wall that you see on the left-hand side with Lincoln's Gettysburg Address inscribed. Behind all of that, you see the Capitol. So this bronze that we have in our collection is one of 12 that were made in 1912, because at that point, Daniel Chester French fully paid his commission, and he was beginning to experiment with making plaster models off the original clay maquette for the larger sculpture that we just saw. And he had previously asked this commission if he could make a life-size version of it in lieu of paying the rest of that commission, and they refused, or they didn't do it. And so this time he went back to them and said, look, I've got to make some money on this thing, basically. And so they agreed to let him make these models off the clay maquette. And so there were the 12 that were produced, and we have one of the 12. And it was given to the League in 1951 by Mrs. Frederick McCowan. And I'm so glad that she did, because it's my favorite Lincoln sculpture in the house. I just love that kind of melancholic look, but pretend that Lincoln had, and keep in mind that Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was given the dedication of the National Cemetery. So he's surrounded by all the dead from the battle itself. It's no wonder he's a little melancholic, right? So that's that. That's what it looks like in the Heritage Center. Right? So to the right, we see the door that takes us up the stairs to the first floor. So up we go. We turn to our left and look on the right-hand wall. And on the right-hand wall, we see this medallion called Triumviri Americani by William Miller, who was a founder from Providence. And we'll see another medallion briefly, not at the Miller Foundry in Providence. Triumviri Americani, so the triumphant Americans. So we have Pater, Father, George Washington; Salvator, Savior, Abraham Lincoln; and Custos, Guardian, right? And that would be U.S. Grant. And this is where you can see it. So it's on the right-hand wall over the doors that lead to the old cafe on the right and the Cafe Meredith on the left. Right. So we walk down the first floor hallway into the 15th Street building. So we're going from east to west. We go up the stairs to the second floor on the 15th Street stairwell. And that's where we find these two sculptures, these two bronze portrait busts. The one on the left done by Edward Wells Volk. And Volk ended up marrying the niece of Stephen Douglas, who was running for president in 1860. In 1858, he was debating with Abraham Lincoln, the great Lincoln-Douglas debates. And Volk had the chance to meet Lincoln and said he would like to do a marble bust of Lincoln. Would Lincoln agree? Lincoln said, sure, not right now. But in 1860, 2 years later, Volk was in Chicago, and so was Lincoln. And Volk sent a message to Lincoln saying, hey, I'm here, you're here, let's get together. And Volk agreed. Lincoln agreed. And so Lincoln went to Volk's studio, where he made a plaster model of Abraham Lincoln. But they started out by making a life mask of Abraham Lincoln. And from that, he created the bust that we see today. So there were a number of different versions of it. Some have the full torso. Ours does not. You can see it just has the neck basically in the top, right where your shoulder blades are, in the front or collarbone. But it's still a magnificent image of Lincoln. And this particular image of Lincoln is probably the foundation that most sculptors used afterwards throughout the 19th and early 20th century. So that's that. The one on the right-hand side was done by George Edwin Bissell, another New Englander. And like A lot of other American sculptors went to Europe, specifically Rome and Paris, to study sculpturing. And Bissell came back to America and would receive a commission to create a life-size sculpture of Abraham Lincoln that was a memorial to the Scottish soldiers who served in the Union Army during the American Civil War. And this is what it looks like. It is in the old Calton Hill burial ground, which is in the northeast section of Edinburgh in Scotland. In the center, you can see the mausoleums behind the sculpture itself. So there's Abraham Lincoln up top. He's holding the Emancipation Proclamation in his hand, and there is a slave who has been freed because of Abraham Lincoln signing that proclamation. And as you can see in the bottom, in memory of Scott. Anybody to go there to see it. It is magnificent. So this is what the two sculptures look like. All right, now we go up the stairs, we turn right down the hallway, and the first room we enter is the Lincoln Memorial Room. And you may remember I've done a whole episode in this room by itself, so I won't repeat everything, but nonetheless, this sculpture of Abraham Lincoln was commissioned by the Union League, but through the Art Association of the Union League. The concept for the memorial room was created in 1915. It was formalized in 1916. The House Committee approved the presentation of this tableau on the West Wall in 1916, and Schweitzer won the commission. His competition was pretty intense. Henry Kirk Bush Brown, who did both the Civil War Memorial, the great high relief in the Broad Street hallway, and then the Spirit of 61 out on Broad Street, magnificent sculpture, and then also Charles Grafley. But Schweitzer won the commission. And so this is his interpretation of Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address. And it was originally meant to be placed in the center of the room, which is why the base of the bronze has 4 bas-reliefs on all 4 sides, so they could all be seen: life, liberty, nature, and governance. But it was clear that that wasn't going to be very practical for the room. And so the sculpture was moved into this niche on the west wall of the room itself. And that is Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address, which is in wonderful gilt lettering at the top of the wall itself. So, all right, now we go out of the Lincoln Memorial Room, across the hallway, and into the library lounge. But before we do that, we're going to look one more time at up close of the bronze by Schweitzer on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, we still have Schweitzer's plaster maquette used to win the competition for the sculpture for the Lincoln Memorial Room, which is all right. Now we're leaving the Lincoln Memorial Room. We're going across the hall to the library lounge, where we will find this wonderful marble done by the American sculptor Raymond Barger, who was originally from Brunswick, Maryland, settled in Cartersville, Bucks County, so suburban Philadelphian for a while, but he eventually settled in California. And while he was, and again, Barger, like many, many Americans, studied in Italy, specifically the American Academy in Rome. And it was there that he came across Professor Kenneth Scott in Cleveland, who was promoting the commissioning of a sculpture of Abraham Lincoln for the Republic of San Marino in Italy. In 1861, San Marino made Lincoln an honorary citizen. And again, think back to what we talked about earlier with Risorgimento and Italy and just becoming a republic. And so San Marino now has a bronze version of this marble. So that was originally done in bronze. And Barger then made this marble version that in 1991 was presented to the Union League by League member Robert Byers at a wonderful luncheon in Lincoln Hall on February the 12th of 1991. I can remember it very well. Barger was there himself, 85 years old, gave a wonderful presentation, wrote a poem for the occasion, and unveiled this marble, his marble of Abraham Lincoln. And this is what it looks like in the library lounge. So I hope you go in there and see it sometime. It's really worth a look. It's really amazing. That is, by the way, Carrara marble, not surprisingly. All right, so we go out hallway again, and we turn right, and we go into Lincoln Hall. And we go through the west doorway, and we look up, and what do we see but this medallion of Abraham Lincoln, done by Franklin Simmons, who was born in Lisbon, Maine, but settled in Portland. And it is one of 31 medallions that were commissioned by William Miller, the founder we saw previously, who did Triumviri Americani. And so of the 31, there are 23 medallions that are known to exist, or 23 different ones. And the league actually has the largest collection of 16 of the 23. And so this is the version of Abraham Lincoln. It is a profile bust of Lincoln. And the original set were to include Lincoln, his cabinet members, and the most prominent or important Union generals and admirals, as well as important American politicians who were supportive of Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. So that's that. And so you walk through the west doorway, you turn around, you look up, and there is the portrait bust inside that tympanum or lunette of Abraham Lincoln. As you can see, there are 2 more medallions on the west wall, and there are 3 on the east wall as well. So there are 6 medallions in Lincoln Hall altogether. But also in Lincoln Hall is this wonderful portrait of Lincoln, which we have also talked about previously. So this was the first painting commissioned by the League on December 30th of 1862 by Edward Dalton Marchant, who would later join the League in 1865. While Marchant actually lived in the White House with the Lincoln family to paint this portrait. The reason I love this painting, I mean, it's my favorite painting in the entire collection because of the symbolism. It was so important at the time. So this painting was meant to hang in Independence Hall because that was the heart of Philadelphia, particularly socially, economically. Everybody in Philadelphia walked through Lincoln through Independence Hall. So here's the message. So Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation January the 1st. That's the proclamation on the table under his left arm. Upper right-hand corner, the goddess of liberty has now trampled the chains of slavery metaphorically open because Lincoln signed that Emancipation Proclamation. Behind Lincoln's right shoulder, we have these 2 columns that represent the solidity of government, and not just that, but the Republic of America, the democratic form of government that was adopted by the Continental Congress in 1776, right? And keep in mind that Greeks and Romans, democracy, all that good stuff. So off to the left-hand column, you see that the sun is rising, that it's getting brighter in the background. So the sun is rising. There's a new day dawning in American history because Abraham Lincoln has signed an Emancipation Proclamation. So here's the message. Lincoln is no longer just the president or the commander-in-chief. He's now the great emancipator because the war is no longer a war of rebellion, secession, or reunion. It is a war to end slavery. And that's the message the League wanted to get across. So here we have Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, if you will, in Lincoln Hall. And this is what it looks like in Lincoln Hall. It's in the central alcove on the north wall. And it has been there since Lincoln Hall opened in 1911. So, all right, now we're going to go, we will leave Lincoln Hall and keep heading east into the Broad Street building, where we will enter the banquet room and turn to our left. And immediately on the left-hand wall, we will find, see it here on the left-hand side, done by Xanthus Russell Smith, who we more familiarly known, at least within League's collection, as having been the artist for the 2 great, wonderful naval paintings of the Monitor and the Merrimack and the Kearsarge in Alabama, both on the first floor of the Broad Street building. And for most of his career, Smith painted naval paintings. He'd been doing it since he was a child. He also served as a midshipman aboard the USS Wabash during the Civil War, so he saw naval combat and things like that. And after the war, he did more naval scenes and other kinds of paintings, more representational, more historic, perhaps, things like genre paintings, whatever you want to call them. But around the turn of the century, around 1900, he started doing portraiture. And so we believe that the portrait you see on the left-hand side dates from 1910. And he based it on a photograph that was taken on June the 3rd of 1860 by the Chicago photographer, Alexander Hester. And that's what you see on the right. Hester made 3 photographs in preparation for Lincoln's presidential bid in 1860. And so Smith simply copied the photograph. And it was a really good idea until in the 1930s, an art conservator came along and, shall we say, altered Lincoln's face. I don't know how else to put it, lightly or otherwise. But you can see how closely Smith really reproduced the photograph. And it must have, before the 1930s, it must have looked magnificent. And not that it's bad now, but it's obviously not as good as it was once upon a time. So, but nonetheless, it goes to show you, though, what artists use as inspiration to make their own paintings, much the way you saw with sculptures earlier and things like that. And this is what the painting looks like as it hangs in the banquet room. So bottom row, second from the left, next to U.S. Grant, now appropriately. So it's a wonderful portrait. Please go on, So someday I hope that all of you, members or a guest, take this little tour of the League House and can look and find that all 11 paintings or sculptures of Abraham Lincoln. So it's a really wonderful collection. I'd be willing to bet there's not another one quite like it anywhere in the country, except for maybe in Washington, D.C. So anyway, so I hope everybody enjoyed our tour through our Lincoln tour through the League. Like I say, Lincolns everywhere, and they are. And why not? Because this was the house that Lincoln built. So how appropriate is that? So thank you for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, stay well, stay healthy, and we appreciate your patronage. So see you soon. Bye now.